Hello, I'm Marcia Cavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, lifting of some COVID restrictions this week was music to the ears of many people, including those in the music industry. Still, the war continues, including the vaccinations. We will look at those stories tonight, as well as the news media's perspective from a year ago this week as the COVID story escalated. We'll also look at the latest in the state's two upcoming congressional races and examine women and congressional careers. Our Future Watch segment surveys a proposed business park for rocket scientists, and the Pelicans hope to fly high now that the second half of the NBA season has begun. On the pad for us are tonight's Informed Sources, Errol Laborde, producer of Informed Sources, Dave Cohen, news director, WWL Radio, Don Ostrom, Channel 12's Future Watch reporter, and Tyler Bridges, reporter of the Times-Picayune, the New Orleans Advocate. We go over to Dave first with our latest COVID news.
Well, let's start with good news. Today was the first time since they started recording in Louisiana how many patients are hospitalized with COVID-19 that number dropped below 500. So for the first time in a year, there are fewer than 500 people in hospitals being treated for COVID-19. So that's very encouraging.
That really is. Very. I mean, what do they attribute that to? Is that because of our mask mandate? Is that more people getting vaccinated, combination of that stuff?
All of the above.
Yeah.
It's all of the mitigation efforts and the increase in vaccinations that have been moving along exponentially and constantly seeing that number growing at a rate that everyone is very pleased to see. The supply, unfortunately, other than the Johnson & Johnson version, is coming in at increasing levels for the state, and the demand remains very high, so they're having no trouble using every single dose of vaccine. You add in the fact that now we have been 3 months removed from New Year's and the Christmas and the Thanksgiving spike, and there hasn't been any huge motivating reason for people to congregate like one of those major holidays, and it's really been very successful in limiting the transmission of the disease. Now, it's not gone. I mean, the Louisiana Department of Health just today reported over 500 new cases. So there is still transmission. There is still community spread, but it's nowhere near where it was. The mayor this week reported that the city of New Orleans had fallen below 1% positivity rate. So that's also good news. The Louisiana Department of Health and Dr. Joe Cantor, the state health officer, were very excited earlier this week when the number of people vaccinated exceeded the number of people who have tested positive for COVID now. So we have more people now who have been inoculated completely than we have that have ever been recorded as contracting it. And the percentage is growing. Now more than 10% of all adults in Louisiana have been given their COVID-19 vaccination, the full dose. Another 8% have started it, and that was as of yesterday's numbers. So as you can see, everything's moving in the right direction. The only caveat, the only kind of uneasiness is that the variants to the original strain of COVID-19 that we saw here in Louisiana are growing. We're seeing more and more variants. And so far, they believe that all three vaccines can handle all the variants they've seen. Their fear is that we get a variant that is resistant to these vaccines, and then they have to go in and re-engineer the vaccines. So far, that hasn't had to happen. And as long as we can continue at this pace of getting people vaccinated, as long as people continue to wear their masks and stay socially distant, despite the fact that we are now in phase 3 across the state and a modified phase 3 in the city, if we can get enough people vaccinated and keep the spread low enough until Easter, hopefully we can avoid seeing an Easter spike like we did from Christmas, from Thanksgiving. And everything's headed in the right direction. You heard the president say yesterday that he believes that they'll have enough vaccine to distribute around the country that every single person, every adult over the age of 16 will be able to be eligible to get vaccinated. And right now in Louisiana, We're not far from there already.
Yeah, well, that's really good. I mean, the push definitely is on to get people vaccinated. For one thing, it'll keep those variants from continuing to mutate. They won't have any place to go if you get your people vaccinated. But they also emphasize, don't let down your guard. I mean, we still have to stay alert, still do the precautions. And so let's talk a bit about the phases. What can people do? And particularly in Orleans, because music is allowed now. But
as of this morning, we can have live music performances again in the city of New Orleans. The state allowed that last week. The city joined the state in allowing it this week. But it's not all happy times for musicians and for venues. There are still rules about under what circumstances you can have a live musical performance. You still have to have the band able to be separated a safe distance from the audience. You still have to have audience members masked and 6 feet apart. You still have to have either plexiglass in front of the band, and all band members 6 feet apart, by the way, or be able to have forced air blowing on the band. Or you have to have an air handling system in the facility that can meet the new guidelines. And not all of these clubs and bars are either big enough to be able to make this happen or have the expensive AC systems to make this happen. So there are still a lot of clubs left out, a lot of bars who cannot have live music. And, you know, the venue operators just told us this week it's still not good enough. And they still may end up with half of all live music venues shutting their doors before the end of the year.
That would really be just crushing, wouldn't it be? Because, I mean, live music, we love our music here, that's for sure.
Dave,
Go ahead, Ian.
yeah. What do you hear about the healthcare system? Like, how much better are they now at being able to deal with COVID than they were at the beginning? Like, probably at the beginning, there were a lot of people asking, well, what do we do now? But has it improved significantly in terms once they get a patient?
Yes, the outcomes are dramatically better now than they were early in the pandemic for a couple of reasons. One, there was a lot of trial and error early on over the past year. They tried all kinds of things from a cocktail of different drugs to different positioning to different equipment to even trying to put plasma from someone who had already developed the antibodies into a patient who did not yet have antibodies. Well, almost all of those earlier treatments they have determined were not nearly as successful, clinically speaking, as they would have liked. So they've been able to weed out all of those things that don't work and find just those specific treatments and regimens that do work. And that has been successful. The other thing is such a vast majority of people over the age of 65 are now vaccinated that they're getting younger and healthier patients in the hospitals who have a better ability to fight the virus and have better survival outcomes. So the survival rate has gone up, along with fewer patients being hospitalized in the first place. And so there's a lot of reason to be optimistic. As long as the rate of people getting vaccinated can continue at its pace, people have to keep doing it. You know, originally when we saw one of these big 1,000-person mass vaccination events, literally it took 5 minutes for all of the spots to fill up in the online registration. Now it's taking hours for it to fill up. And that's why the governor essentially said anyone over 16 now can sign up. Now, you have to meet one of the criteria,
right.
But 2/3 of Louisianians qualify just on being overweight.
It's just definitely opened up. All right, Dave, thanks a lot. Tyler, over to you. We do have congressional races happening, and early voting is going on. Actually, it started, last weekend? And that's for 5th District and 2nd District. How are these looking?
Right. Early voting began last Saturday, and it still we have one more day of it tomorrow, Saturday, and then the primary is for March 20th. And as you mentioned, there are 2 races. The 5th Congressional District race is in a sprawling district of 24 parishes. It goes from Monroe through Alexandria, St. Francisville, down to Bogalusa. The one that I think most people in this area are interested in is the race that is to fill the seat that Cedric Richmond vacated when he took the job in the Biden White House. So that includes most of New Orleans, the West Bank of Jefferson Parish, a little bit of the East Bank, and extends up through the river parishes into Baton Rouge. And there are 2 Democrats from New Orleans, state senators, who are seen as the main contenders. That's Karen Carter Peterson and Troy Carter. Troy Carter has most of the endorsements from the local area. Karen Carter Peters leaning more on her national Democratic connections. But there's a Democrat out of Baton Rouge named Gary Chambers, who has got a very, very strong social media presence. He's most recently touting the endorsement of Big Frida, and and that video has been seen a huge number of times. So that Gary Chambers, less well known, doesn't have the big name endorsements, but there's a path to victory for him too in the March 20th primary.
So folks in New Orleans really are not that aware of Gary Chambers. He's from Baton Rouge. He's been an activist there. Could his social media activism and his success with it really make an inroad?
Yeah, I'd say 10 years ago, we wouldn't be talking about him having a chance, but we've seen in recent years how candidates can harness social media and the internet to raise a lot of money and to get their message out there, not through the traditional means of candidate endorsements and TV ads. And Gary Chambers, who's an activist and advocate in Baton Rouge, really does have that big social media presence. And we saw that in 2018 in New York, where Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was elected, and I think very few people gave her a chance. Bernie Sanders harnessed the internet, get a huge number of contributions and to power his campaign, both in 2016 and 2020. So a candidate like Gary Chambers, who's not really known in the New Orleans area, but he does have a chance. And also it's important to note that the turnout projections are about 15 to 20% of registered voters. So really, it could be a surprise.
It could work to his benefit, the low turnout is what you're saying.
Right.
You know, another possibility is where you have the two leading candidates are both polling in the 30 percentile somewhere away. And it could be a possibility that by election day, if voters don't feel like the other candidates are showing any tractions, even if they polled for them, they're going to say, well, why waste my vote? I'm going to go for one of the two leading candidates. And so there's another possibility that a whole lot of votes can just stampede to the two leading campaigns, and it becomes closer to a primary win than it looks like right now.
And wait, Tyler, let's get you to touch real quickly on 5th Congressional District 2 and Julia Letlow.
Yeah, so I went to a meet on Tuesday to see Julia Letlow speak to the Meet Rotary Club. So again, it's a district that begins in Monroe but extends down to the Florida parishes. And of course, Meet is where John Bell Edwards is from, but Julia Letlow spoke there. Now her husband, you'll remember, died from the complications of the coronavirus on December 29th. Luke Letlow was his name. He was 41 years old. He had just won the seat days away from taking office, and he tragically died.
Yeah.
And so now Julia has, as she said to the group, she's picked up the torch, and she's got very solid credentials and is the overwhelming favorite in that race.
Okay, and Errol, let's go on over to you because you wanted to talk about women from Louisiana in Congress, and we have two women in these two different races seeking the seat.
Yeah, because we have two prominent women, it's kind of raised the question about the past with women in Congress. For New Orleans in the House of Representatives, there haven't been very many. There was the Kathy Long, who was the widow of Gillis Long, and when he died, that she was elected to his seat. And then Lindy Boggs, and so the two you see were widows of someone who was a congressman. Lindy Boggs was Hale Boggs' widow when he was killed in a plane crash. Now, once she became elected, I mean, she was more than just the weeping widow. She was someone who was a real powerhouse in the Boggs organization, and was there almost 2 decades and became a major force in Congress, and so she was good. Now, for in the Senate, it's a little bit different. When you have a vacancy in the House, when you have a vacancy, that vacancy is filled by a special election. In the Senate, when you have a vacancy, the vacancy is filled by the governor appointing an interim senator until an election was held. So the first time that was used was after Huey Long was assassinated, and again, his widow, Rose Long, was appointed to fill the seat. She wasn't there very long, but she occupied it. So she would have been the first woman in the Senate. When Alan Ellender died, it was Edwin Edwards was governor, and he got to appoint the interim person. And Edwards, in typical Edwards style, made an appointment. He says, "Look, this is the one person in the state who I know I can trust to accept the appointment and not run for the office on her own." So he appointed his wife, Elaine. who served a couple of months until another election was held, and that was when Ben Johnson was elected. Mary Landrieu was someone who just won it on her own inertia. By the time she ran, she'd been a state representative and a state treasurer, and then went on to serve several terms as a state senator. Away from Congress, there was a woman named Mary Louise Parker who was state treasurer for something like 19 years. And I think of all the statewide officials, especially she's probably the one who served the most time in office. And of course, I think the champion is Kathleen Blanco. Kathleen Blanco was Public Service Commissioner, first woman Public Service Commissioner, Lieutenant Governor, and then Governor. What you're seeing today is, while there's not that many people elected on the state level, at the parish level, the lower levels, you're seeing more and more success among women. We saw it in Orleans Parish, especially with judgeships. We're seeing it in terms of parish executives. The mayors of New Orleans and Baton Rouge are both women, and like Shreveport and Lake Charles had women mayors a long time ago. And you see several parish presidents, and so there's traction out there.
Absolutely, there's traction, great strides, but still more room to go with that too. To have more women in
to get people elected to a higher
seats.
office, then they need to get elected to a lower office first, usually, and that's what's happening. You're starting to see that type of movement.
All righty, thanks a lot, Dawn. Let's go over to you. Space campus at Michoud. What does that mean, really?
It really means rocket scientists and everybody in between. So we're talking about women in politics. Let's talk about women in STEM and men in STEM, and plenty of job opportunities for them in the state. This week, Governor Edwards and the state announced a memorandum of understanding in conjunction with NASA for the Michoud facility. And that memorandum of understanding, or MOU for short, means that over the next couple of years, the two will work together. The state and NASA will work together to build a space campus at NASA Michoud, or to at least think one out. There are 50 acres of possible development where they're building the rockets right now at NASA. What else can they build? They're talking about automated cars, perhaps, or call centers, a lot of technology where research and technology can combine and really have great minds and great resources in an area where you have the facilities for them working together. There's not a blueprint. There's not a sketch or an idea. It really is just a dream right now to build this campus out. My first question when I heard it was, is there even a workforce to support it? If they build it, will they come? Will the workers be there? And I'm told, yes, definitely. We have good plans in place right now. For example, Nunez Community College right now has really become a pipeline for NASA. They're doing 2-year training, and they go directly from school. The students go directly from school at Nunez to jobs with NASA, and these aren't low-paying jobs. GNO Inc., which announced this news this week between the state and NASA, is putting out a jobs report and saying there are attainable ways right here in the city and in the state to transfer skills to those jobs that maybe went away due to COVID. You can transfer those skills into a skill where people are hiring right now, and hiring at a more promising career path. So the timeline is tough to answer. The ball is really in NASA's court and the state's court to kind of come up with something that will work and attract the businesses to this facility. You and I were talking before the show, Marcia, and Michoud has the coolest, biggest manufacturing space you've seen. They're building the big rockets to go to Mars, but they also have a lot more space. Could companies like SpaceX help it grow? There is a wind company there right now that's testing wind turbines. It's a company that was purchased by GE for future power. So it's kind of anybody's idea what it might become in 10 years, but the goal in 10 years is that there will be more companies housed there, building and doing things we might not even know about yet, and more people, therefore, also living in New Orleans East and growing that area.
And we're seeing more STEM educational opportunities grow, too, as you point out with Nunez. STEM NOLA is really expanding its whole enterprise that Dr. Calvin Mackey had started. So that's to give, our folks a chance, our young folks a chance in science.
Absolutely.
Okay, we'll see what's going over there. That's
and
pretty
Delgado
exciting.
too. Nunez and Delgado, and then our four-year institutions also are supplying part of that workforce, and it may all ultimately tie in with biomedical. So we've got areas. It's the new Orleans. It's no longer just tourism or oil and gas. We've got research-based medicine, research-based technology, space. It's just the next step forward.
And you mentioned GNO Inc. I'm going to put in a plug for Living in the New Normal. We'll be focusing on that, and that is going to be next Thursday night at 7:30. We'll have GNO Inc. CEO Michael Hecht on, and also Laverne Coombs from the New Orleans Regional Black Chamber of Commerce. So look for that. That's what they're focusing on, our future opportunities. Okay, COVID news in the media. It was a year ago this week when we were all hit with it, and just sort of wanted to get your ideas of how everybody covered it. No, Dave, actually, we're going to start with you.
Well, it was very difficult at first for broadcast media to determine how to continue to broadcast while keeping everyone 6 feet apart, while not seeing newsrooms and studios fill with COVID-infected people. And we saw unprecedented numbers of journalists in the broadcast medium working from home. In radio and in television, obviously over the internet as well, and right here on this program. Several times I appeared on this program from home, something that we never dreamt of more than a year ago.
I'm sitting in my bedroom while I talk to you guys.
That's right.
And no one had planned on that. Now, I think the bean counters love it, and they think it's the best thing that ever happened, that you can do all of this stuff remotely. But it's been challenging to manage newsrooms from a distance, to have reporters out in the field from a distance, not coming together, meeting and planning. How do they interact with their coworkers in broadcast media, with the camera operators who are in the field, with the reporters? And it's been very challenging. But by and large, the media have not become the story. I think that the media have done a very good job of very few members of the media contracting COVID, and they took many steps that were necessary, whether it was having meteorologists on television or sportscasters on television, newscasters in radio, talk show hosts in radio, all working from home and really seizing on available technology.
Right.
Now, there were plenty of glitches, and there were plenty of opportunities where things could go wrong, and maybe they did, but not to the extent they could have. But by and large, we've made it work.
Well, I think the audience also has been really, really forgiving. Those who, watching broadcast projects like, content such as what we offer, everybody's sort of become used to it and watching folks come to you from their living room or kitchen or whatever. Tyler, what about you in the print medium?
Yeah, we at The Advocate have been working at home as well. And I remember when the pandemic hit, I had been covering the state legislature in Baton Rouge. And at that time, a lot of the legislators, I have to note, particularly the Republicans, were not wearing masks. So it was a relief for me, actually, to be able to start working out of my home and be much safer there. But the times that I have gone out, which has not been a lot to report on stories, I note that people are wearing in masks. But when I go out to other areas, again, like I was at a meet on Tuesday, people are not wearing masks. But I think we all at The Advocate are looking for the opportunity to be in the newsroom again on St. Charles Avenue.
Yeah.
It's kind of a nice thing to be able to run into people and you get ideas and things like that, and also be able to go out more and cover the stories.
Yeah, newsrooms definitely have a certain kind of energy. In planning this show, we've had to certainly make adjustments, like seeing Dawn come from her bedroom.
Well, there was a time, I guess a few weeks after, when everything started to shut down, that we were doing this. Everybody was from a remote site, including Marcia. You were anchoring, and so we were doing like 5. And thank God the technology people here were able to figure all that out.
George figured it out.
Yeah. George is the real hero of all this.
Yes.
And so we were able to do more positions from the studio, which I think has some advantages in terms of the overall quality. But at the same time, look at the flexibility it allows, because there's always been remote locations in TV, but in the past you'd have had to send like a truck and put down cables and get a satellite dish and do all that. Now someone can just sit by the computer. So we have the option, if there was an important reporter who was in Washington today, to tap them in or to do it and to bring in more people from more places. And so that's
So
been good too.
it's something that's going to stick around with us. And so, Don, I guess we'll be seeing you from your bedroom now and again too. Huh? But I do look forward
It's
to
nice
having you
when
right
I come
at the
to
table.
the studio. I think what we miss is all of us sitting together,
Right.
actually side by side. And even though you all are there and I'm here, you guys aren't even sitting next to each other to be able to
No.
turn and speak to one
Right.
another, and it makes it challenging for us to communicate.
I know, but everybody's had to rise to it, and
But
we'll
the
do
other
it as
thing we
long as
found
we
out-
have to. But we have to move to the next segment real quick. We just have about a minute and a half for you to talk about the Pelicans.
Well, this is going to be the segment when I was going to talk about how exciting it is that the Pelicans are moving into the second half of their season. They were showing a little bit of progress if they move to the midway point, and now let's go. Unfortunately, last night they played the worst team in the NBA, the Minnesota Timberwolves, that only won 7 games. They played them at home against a new coach, a new interim coach who had just been hired, hadn't won a game yet. Pelicans had a 16-point lead at the beginning, and they wound up losing by 30 points. And so what a big thud in terms of starting off the second half of the season. And the coach was very, very critical of the team. The problem has always been defense. The offense has been pretty good, but the coach was saying, even with a mediocre offense last night, you can't win with a defense that was as bad. Now, the team probably wasn't as bad as it showed last night. Some players said, well, we're a little rusty from having the All-Star break. It's going to be better than that. The record is 15-22, but they're in the battle to get into the playoffs. It's always the top 8 in each division. They can do it, but they're going to need to put together some win streaks. Meanwhile, they got some exciting players, and so if you're not counting too much on the NBA championship, just to see some interesting basketball, it's worth seeing.
We hope that they can turn it around. One last thought, and then we're moving to the other stories.
What about the Pelicans?
Yeah, did you have any other?
Yeah, I'll just say that attendance has always been an issue for this franchise. This year we've had a bit of an excuse because of COVID limitations, and so last night they're drawing about 3,000 people, which is about all that they could. But they need to win so that when people can come back and really start following the team.
We want to see them have a winning season. Real quick for you, E. Other stories.
Okay, New Orleans. Speaking of sports, New Orleans has a rugby team called the NOLA Gold, which has been around for a few years. Now they're in a league which they call the Major League Rugby League, and their season starts on March 20th. They're playing at the old Zephyr Stadium, which they call the Shrine on Airlines, and they're playing the Washington, D.C. team.
Okay, Tyler, you, real quick.
Yeah, we just go back to the 2nd Congressional District race. The winner of this race will hold that seat potentially for a long time. There's 15 candidates, so I hope people will get educated. There's a Republican, there's a Libertarian, there's some big-name Democrats. I hope people will get educated and do their civic duty and vote on March 20th.
Don, real quick.
As Dave reported, live music starts again tonight in the city of New Orleans. I think New Orleanians are ready to go and support that industry and try to keep it alive post-COVID.
Indeed, we want to. All right, Dave.
In the stimulus bill that the president just signed, finally there's relief for restaurants. Local restaurateurs in the next month or so will be able to start applying for up to $5 million to replace losses during the pandemic. It's bringing hope to that industry. The problem is there have been $250 million lost nationwide to the restaurant industry, and there's less than $30 million in the bill.
Okay, guys. Well, thanks a lot for joining us, and thank you all for joining us, too. See you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening. Bye.